You are seeing this because your psyche has been sending you signals. Signals that you are not broken. Signals that what you are experiencing is not pathology. This is not a coincidence. The restlessness you feel is not a malfunction. The darkness you have been wandering through is not depression. It is the beginning of something Carl Jung called the confrontation with the unconscious. And right now, in this exact moment, you are ready to understand what that actually means. I have discovered throughout my work that before a psychological breakthrough, before true individuation begins, the psyche emits specific signals. Most people miss them. They pathologize them. They medicate them. They try to suppress them with distractions and diagnoses. They stay stuck in what Jung called psychological sleep. They remain identified with their persona, their social mask, while something deeper inside them screams for recognition. But you are different. You are here because some part of you knows, some part of you recognizes that the darkness you have been experiencing is not the end of something, it is the beginning. Right now, in this exact moment, you are standing at the gateway between psychological sleep and awakening, between living as the person the world demands you to be and becoming who you actually are beneath all the conditioning. Jung wrote the Red Book during his own descent into the unconscious. He called it his most important work. In it, he documented his confrontation with forces inside himself that terrified him, forces that nearly destroyed him, but that ultimately transformed him into the psychologist who would change our understanding of the human psyche forever. And the first thing he discovered was this: what we call depression is often the soul's refusal to continue living a false life. Here is what terrifies most people about awakening. It is not the darkness, it is not the uncertainty, it is not even the pain of transformation. It is the responsibility that comes with seeing the truth about yourself. Jung introduced a concept that most people misunderstand. He called it the shadow. But there is another dimension to this that I have discovered throughout decades of studying his work and working with people in psychological crisis. There is what I call the golden shadow. These are the parts of yourself you have been hiding, not because they are dark, but because they are powerful. The creativity you suppress, the intelligence you downplay, the ambition you apologize for, the spiritual depth you hide because it makes others uncomfortable. We stay depressed. We stay stuck in what feels like psychological quicksand. Why? Because claiming your power, living from your authentic self, becoming individuated means you can no longer hide behind victimhood. You can no longer blame circumstances. You can no longer use your suffering as an identity. And that terrifies people more than staying depressed ever could. I have discovered something I call the addiction to psychological sleep. Most people are not avoiding depression, they are avoiding awakening. Because awakening means you must take full responsibility for the life you have been living, for the compromises you have made, for the person you have been pretending to be. You can no longer say, "I did not know." You can no longer claim ignorance about your own participation in your suffering. Right now, your psyche is preparing you for this responsibility. The darkness you feel is not pathology, it is preparation. But you must understand what you are actually preparing for. Before we go deeper, you need to understand why you have not broken through yet. Why you have remained in this state of what looks like depression, but is actually something entirely different. It is not because you lack strength. It is not because you are broken. It is not because the universe is punishing you, or because you were born under the wrong stars. You have been addicted to psychological unconsciousness because consciousness is terrifying. Being awake means you must face everything you have been avoiding, every truth you have been suppressing, every part of yourself you have been denying. Your brain interprets awakening as a threat. Your nervous system responds to consciousness the way it responds to danger, because from the perspective of your ego, your current identity, awakening is danger. I have spent decades studying this pattern. I watched brilliant people approach their greatest psychological breakthroughs only to implode at the last moment. I watched them self-sabotage in spectacularly consistent ways. One person started having panic attacks the week before their breakthrough. Another developed sudden physical symptoms that required immediate medical attention. Another created a dramatic relationship crisis that consumed all their psychological energy. A patient approached the moment where he would finally have to acknowledge his creative genius. He had been working toward this recognition for months. Then, 3 days before his first gallery opening, he destroyed all his artwork. He called me in crisis. He said his work was worthless, that he was a fraud. This was not a breakdown. This was the psyche protecting itself from the terror of transformation. Another person came to me after years of what they called depression. They had been in therapy, they had tried medications, nothing worked. I realized this was not depression. This was the soul refusing to continue living a life that violated their deepest nature. They were working in finance. They hated every moment of it. But they continued because that is what their family expected, what their education prepared them for, what their identity was built around. Their depression was not a disease, it was a message. It was their psyche saying this life is killing us. But when we started exploring what they actually wanted to do, panic set in. They started missing sessions. They created emergencies. They found reasons to avoid the conversation. Why? Because transformation means death, not physical death, psychological death. The death of the identity you have been living from. The death of the person your family knows. The death of the self your friends expect. Jung called this the dissolution of the persona. It is one of the most terrifying psychological experiences a human being can face, because before the new self emerges, the old self must die. And there is a moment in between where you are nothing, where you have no identity at all. Right now, your psyche is preparing for that death. The symptoms you are experiencing are not signs of pathology. They are signs of readiness. They are specific signs that reveal when this turn is coming, when the awakening is no longer theoretical but imminent. I have documented these patterns across hundreds of cases. They appear with remarkable consistency. First sign, what Jung called enantiodromia, the conversion of something into its opposite. This shows up as sudden reversals in your personality and preferences. You have been extroverted your entire life, and suddenly you crave solitude. You have been rational and skeptical, and suddenly you are drawn to the mystical and symbolic. You have been focused on external achievement, and suddenly none of it matters. Most people interpret this as instability, as a sign that something is wrong with them. They try to correct it. They force themselves back into their familiar patterns. I understand this differently. This is the psyche balancing itself. This is compensation. You have lived too long from one pole, and now the unconscious is asserting the opposite to create wholeness. When you feel this reversal happening, this is not breakdown. This is integration beginning. Second sign, loss of interest. Things that used to comfort you suddenly feel empty. People you used to tolerate suddenly feel unbearable. Work that used to engage you suddenly feels meaningless. Entertainment that used to distract you suddenly cannot hold your attention. You sit in front of the television and feel nothing. You scroll through your phone and feel disgusted. You attend social gatherings and feel like you are watching yourself perform from a distance. This is the psyche withdrawing energy from what no longer serves growth. Jung called this the withdrawal of projections. You stop seeing meaning in external things because the real work is happening internally. This is not depression. This is readiness. This is your soul saying, we are done pretending these things matter. Most people panic at this stage. They interpret the emptiness as evidence of pathology. They seek stimulation. They create drama. They find new distractions. But the emptiness is not the problem. The emptiness is the solution. It is space being created for something new. Third sign, the pressure cooker feeling. You sense something building inside you. You cannot name it. You cannot explain it. But you know that change is coming. You feel it in your body, a tightness in your chest, a restlessness in your limbs, a sensation of energy trapped inside you with nowhere to go. Your sleep changes. You wake at 3 in the morning with your mind racing. Your appetite changes. Food loses its appeal, or you eat compulsively to suppress the feeling. Your body knows something your conscious mind does not yet understand. This is your psyche generating the psychological pressure needed to break through. Jung experienced this before his descent into the unconscious. He described it as a sense of impending catastrophe, as if something inside him was demanding to be born. This pressure is not pathology. This is preparation. This is your unconscious gathering the energy required for transformation. Most people try to suppress this feeling. They drink, they work obsessively, they lose themselves in relationships or entertainment or endless business. They do anything to avoid sitting with the pressure. But the pressure is not your enemy. The pressure is what breaks the shell. It is what allows the new self to emerge. Right now, if you are feeling this pressure, you are closer than you think. Here is where it gets dangerous. When awakening is close, when the breakthrough is imminent, self-sabotage kicks in hardest. I have documented this pattern across hundreds of cases. The psyche does not resist change when change is distant and theoretical. It resists change when change is real and imminent. Think about the last time you were close to a genuine breakthrough, the last time you felt yourself on the edge of real transformation. What happened? Did you suddenly create a crisis in your relationship? Did you pick a fight with someone important? Did you make an impulsive decision that derailed your progress?
Did you develop sudden physical symptoms? Did you convince yourself you were sick, that you needed to focus on your health before you could focus on transformation? Did you become obsessed with a problem that required all your attention? A work crisis, a family emergency, a financial issue that demanded immediate action?
Did you start questioning everything? Did you tell yourself this awakening thing was nonsense, that you were being naive, that you should just accept reality and stop seeking something more? These are not random events. These are your psyche trying to protect you from the terror of success, from the terror of actually becoming conscious, actually becoming individuated, actually living from your authentic self. I watched a patient approach the moment where they would finally have to leave their marriage. A marriage they had known was wrong for years. A marriage that was slowly killing their soul. They had done the work. They had built the courage. They were days away from having the conversation. Then they developed a mysterious illness. Nothing the doctors could diagnose, but severe enough to require all their energy. Severe enough to make the conversation impossible. The illness disappeared 3 weeks later, after the moment of potential breakthrough had passed. This was not manipulation. This was not conscious. This was the psyche creating a physical barrier to protect them from the psychological death that leaving the marriage represented. Because success means you have to maintain that new level. You have to live up to your potential. You have to become responsible for your own awakening. You can no longer hide behind circumstances or other people or external barriers. That feels more dangerous than staying asleep. That feels more threatening than staying depressed. Because depression, at least, is familiar. Depression does not demand anything from you except survival. Awakening demands everything, but here is the truth. Awakening is not about luck. It is not about timing. It is not about the right circumstances finally appearing. It is not about finding the right teacher or reading the right book or having the right experience. Awakening is about allowing. It is about stopping your resistance to your own evolution. I discovered that people do not fail at awakening because they lack ability. They fail because they cannot tolerate the psychological reality of consciousness. They cannot tolerate what being awake actually requires. They cannot handle being seen. They cannot handle having power. They cannot handle being responsible for their own lives. They cannot handle the loneliness that comes with individuation. They cannot handle disappointing people who are invested in the sleeping version of them. So they sabotage themselves. They create the familiar pattern of failure, of crisis, of returning to unconsciousness, of staying depressed. Because the depressed identity feels safe. It feels known. It feels like home. Even when that home is burning down around them, they know how to be depressed. They know what depressed requires of them. They know how people respond to them when they are depressed. They know that role. The awakened self has no script. Right now you are being asked to burn that home down yourself. You are being asked to destroy the depressed identity, to stop using suffering as protection, to stop hiding behind psychological sleep. And that is terrifying, because the awakened identity has no script. You do not know how to be that person yet. You do not know what that person does, how that person moves through the world, how people will respond to them. Jung wrote in the Red Book about the terror of encountering your own soul. He described it as meeting a force inside yourself that is more powerful than your ego, more ancient, more knowing. Most people spend their entire lives avoiding that encounter. They stay on the surface. They live from the persona. They identify with their roles and relationships and achievements. But you are not becoming someone new. You are becoming who you actually are beneath all the conditioning and trauma and fear, beneath all the expectations and demands and projections. The person you are becoming has been there all along, waiting, sending signals, creating pressure, withdrawing energy from the false life. That person is not depressed. That person has never been depressed. That person has been imprisoned. And depression has been the bars of the prison. When you start to evolve beyond your family system, beyond your culture, beyond the collective agreement about what constitutes a normal life, the collective unconscious pushes back. This is why awakening feels lonely at first. This is why consciousness isolates you. People who are comfortable with the sleeping version of you become uncomfortable with the awakening version. Your depression was familiar to them. It confirmed their own choices to remain asleep. It allowed them to feel helpful, to feel needed, to feel superior. Your awakening threatens all of that. When you individuate, when you become psychologically whole, you hold up a mirror to everyone around you. Your freedom becomes a reflection of their imprisonment. Your consciousness becomes a reminder of their unconsciousness. Some people will celebrate your transformation, but many will not. Many will try to pull you back. They will remind you of your past failures. They will question your changes. They will call your awakening dangerous or selfish or naive. This is not personal. This is the collective unconscious defending itself. This is the pressure that keeps most people asleep. When you individuate, you will lose people. You must lose people. You cannot carry unconscious relationships into a conscious life. You cannot maintain connections that require you to stay small. And that is not tragedy, that is liberation. Jung wrote that individuation creates a sense of isolation, not because you are alone, but because you are no longer merged with the collective. You are no longer living from borrowed values and inherited beliefs. You stand alone. But that aloneness is where true relationship becomes possible, because now you meet others as yourself, not as the person you were pretending to be. You do not need to become someone different. You need to stop pretending to be someone you are not. You need to stop performing the depression, stop performing the victim, stop performing the helpless one who needs saving. Your freedom is your responsibility, and that responsibility is what transforms depression into awakening, the way forward. First, you must recognize your addiction to unconsciousness. You must see clearly how you have been using depression as protection, as an identity, as a way to avoid the responsibility that consciousness demands. This means examining your life honestly. What are you avoiding by staying depressed? What are you not having to face? What decisions are you not having to make? What conversations are you not having to have? Write these down. Look at them clearly. Do not judge them. Simply see them. You must understand that this recognition is not self-criticism, it is self-knowledge, it is the beginning of consciousness. Second, you must integrate your golden shadow. You must reclaim the power, the creativity, the intelligence, the spiritual depth you have been hiding. Jung discovered that we project our own potential onto others. We admire in them what we refuse to claim in ourselves. We call them special, gifted, chosen, while we remain ordinary. This is a defense against your own greatness. Look at the people you admire. What qualities do they possess? Write them down. Now understand this. You cannot recognize in another what does not exist in you. The qualities you see in them are mirrors of your own unclaimed potential. Stop projecting your power. Start claiming it, even when it feels like pretending, especially when it feels like pretending. Third, you must grieve the depressed identity. You must let it die. This is not metaphor. This is literal psychological death. The person you have been, the one who stayed small and safe and depressed, must die. And you must allow that death to happen. You do not need to kill it violently. You simply stop feeding it, stop performing it, stop identifying with it. When the thought arises, I am depressed, you recognize it as an old identity trying to reassert itself. You do not fight it. You simply do not give it energy. You create a ritual if you need to. You write a letter to your depressed self. You acknowledge everything it protected you from. You thank it, and you let it go. Grief will come. Let it come. The end of an identity, even a painful one, is still a loss. Fourth, you must claim the awakened identity before you have evidence. This is where most people fail. They wait to feel awakened before they claim it. They wait for proof before they commit. But transformation does not work that way. You must claim the new identity first. You must act from consciousness before consciousness feels natural. Jung called this active imagination. You imagine the person you are becoming, not as fantasy, as reality. You feel into that identity, you make decisions from that identity, you speak from that identity. Every time you feel the pull back into depression, you ask yourself this question: what would my awakened self do right now? Then you do that thing. You do it even when it feels false, even when it feels like performance, because that is how identity shifts, through repeated action that eventually becomes natural. Fifth, you must protect your transformation from collective pressure. This means setting boundaries with people who want you to stay depressed, with people who are invested in your unconsciousness, with people who feel threatened by your awakening. You do not need to explain yourself. You do not need to justify your changes. You simply remove yourself from relationships and situations that require you to stay small. You find allies, people who are also awakening, people who understand the path, people who can witness your transformation without trying to stop it. You protect your energy, you protect your time, you protect your psychological space. This is not selfishness, this is survival. Sixth, you must learn to tolerate consciousness without sabotaging it. This is the most difficult practice. When you start to feel powerful, when you start to feel awake, your psyche will create tests, situations that tempt you back into unconsciousness, into depression, into the familiar pattern. You must recognize these tests when they appear. You must see them as initiation, not as failure. When the crisis appears, when the sabotage kicks in, you pause, you breathe, you ask yourself this question: is this real, or is this my psyche testing my commitment to awakening? Most of the time, it's a test. And you pass the test by not reacting, by not abandoning your transformation, by continuing to choose consciousness even when unconsciousness feels safer. Seventh, understand that awakening is not a destination, it is a practice. You do not awaken once and stay awakened forever. Consciousness is a daily choice. Every day you choose awareness over sleep, authenticity over performance, truth over comfort. Some days will be easier than others. Some days you will feel powerful and conscious and awake. Other days you will feel the pull back into depression. Both are part of the process. Neither means you are failing. You simply return to the practice. You return to the question: what would my awakened self do? And you do that thing. Over time, the awakened identity becomes more natural than the depressed one. The conscious choice becomes more familiar than the unconscious pattern. You become who you actually are. This is your turn. Not because the universe suddenly decided to be kind, but because you are finally ready to let yourself awaken, because you are finally done with psychological sleep. You are finally done with depression as an identity, done with hiding behind suffering, done with using unconsciousness as protection. The signs are already appearing. You feel them: the pressure, the restlessness, the dissatisfaction, the sense that something inside you is demanding to be born. These are not random. These are your psyche preparing for transformation. These are the signals that Jung wrote about in the Red Book, the signals that appear before consciousness breaks through. Your task is not to create the awakening. Your task is to stop resisting it. I have always believed that people who successfully complete this process become individuated. They become whole. They integrate the shadow and reclaim the golden shadow. They stop living from the persona and start living from the self. They awaken because they are psychologically aligned with consciousness, because they've stopped sabotaging their own evolution, because they have stopped using depression as an excuse to remain small. You are one of them. You are ready. You have been ready. You have simply been afraid to claim it. Right now, In this exact moment, your psyche is offering you the choice. You can return to sleep. You can go back to calling this depression, medicating it and managing it. Or you can recognize it for what it actually is, a call to awakening, an invitation to become who you actually are. Here is what you must do. First, acknowledge your unconscious sabotage patterns without judgment. Write them down, see them clearly, understand that awareness is the beginning of change. Second, decide that psychological unconsciousness is no longer acceptable. Make the commitment consciousness, not as a wish, as a decision, a line in the sand. Third, identify one action you can take this very day that aligns with your awakened identity. Not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, today, right now.
One small action that says, I am choosing consciousness. Fourth,
expect resistance, not as evidence of failure, as evidence of transformation. When the sabotage appears, when the crisis kicks in, when you feel the pull back into depression, recognize it as your psyche testing your commitment, and continue forward anyway. Fifth, find allies who can witness your evolution without trying to hinder it. People who understand the path. People who are also awakening. Remove yourself from relationships that require you to stay depressed. Sixth, commit to the daily practice of choosing from your highest self. Every morning ask yourself this question: what would my awakened self do today? Then do those things, even when they feel uncomfortable. Especially when they feel uncomfortable. Seventh, ask yourself this question throughout the day: what would the whole realized version of me do right now? Do that. Especially when it feels like pretending. Especially when it feels too big. Especially when it feels impossible. Because that is how you bridge the gap. You act as if until you become. You perform consciousness until consciousness becomes natural. You practice awakening until awakening becomes your reality. You are standing at the gateway. The choice is yours. You can return to the familiar pattern of depression and unconsciousness. You can pretend you did not hear these truths. You can go back to sleep. Or you can step through the gateway and become who you actually are. You can choose awakening over depression, consciousness over sleep, your authentic self over your performance. Jung wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. That individuation is the task that gives life meaning. That the confrontation with the unconscious, as terrifying as it is the only path to psychological wholeness. Your transformation is not just personal, it is collective. When you stop performing depression and start living from consciousness, when you stop projecting your power and start claiming it, you change the frequency of possibility for everyone around you. You become proof that awakening is possible. You become evidence that consciousness is a choice. You become a mirror for others who are still sleeping. You are finally ready to awaken. You are finally choosing your evolution over your excuses. You are finally allowing the death of who you were pretending to be and the birth of who you actually are. And that choice changes everything. Welcome to the beginning of who you were always meant to be.